and burn.
Hey everybody! So tonight I am actually going to be discussing Faces of Death 2. I know I said I was only going to do Faces of Death 4 because these movies don't... Well, you've seen one, you've seen them all, and I'm kind of sick of them at this point. But I received 4 messages via email asking me if I could do at least one more of them. One person suggested that I could do the second one because I mentioned in the video about the fourth how the second's cover art was my favorite. So that's the one I'm going to do here, which is Faces of Death 2. You'd think I would have remembered when this came out, but I don't. The reason that I'm doing 2 is, of course, the artwork is the scariest, I guess. Not so much anymore. Not at all anymore, actually. But when I was a kid, this artwork scared me the most. And I do have to say that this is potentially the most real one out of the bunch. Like, I would say that the fourth is sort of the rock star of the group. And, oh, that's right, quickly, I should make a point of how I kind of screwed up in the fourth one. I said his name was Dr. B. Gross, but Dr. B. Gross, of course, is only in the first 3. But for me, Dr. B. Gross is kind of the rock star of the series. Like, he's the name. Anybody who knows these, you're like, oh, remember the Faces of Death movies? And everybody goes, oh, Dr. B. Gross. But yeah, as it turns out, Michael Carr only portrayed him in the first 3, and it was somebody else as of 4 forward. So I fucked up there. And so, I get to make this video in some sort of pathetic apology for that, too, because... Well, no, I'm not apologizing. Why did I say apology? It doesn't matter. I'm doing this one because this just might be the most real one, at least out of the 4. I only really count the first 4 as being, like, the legit ones. It seems like this one is the most honest. For example, like, in the first Faces of Death, the family killer struck me as being kind of fake. The guy that wiped out his family and has to have the cops go in with the gas masks. That struck me as being a little phony. And then there was the gas chamber electrocutions. I'm not really sure, again, if they were real. The gas chamber looked more real than the electrocution was in the first one. And, of course, not to mention the horrible music they chose to play, like the circus music they had playing over the electrocution scene from the first one. The satanic cult, the blood ritual thing, the smearing the blood all over them, that looked incredibly fake. The bear attack was awful. Look out, Bill. Be nice. Look out, Bill. Be careful, Bill. And there's this perfect third camera a ways off from the bear and the 2 human subjects. And you can see all of a sudden when the bear stands up and he attacks the husband or whatever, the third camera that once had a clear wide shot is suddenly all up close and showing the bear's jaws and then it's just the guy's mauled. So I don't buy that either. And the third one, I don't think the rape that they showed during the courtroom scene, I don't think that was real. The PCP guy struck me as being kind of fake. The jumper, the guy that jumps, the suicide, the guy jumps off the building, that is clearly a dummy that hits the ground in the third one. And the fourth one is a complete mess. The fourth one has some of the worst reenactments out of all of them. The fourth one is like the phoniest, I guess. But that, again, leads me back into this one here. This one feels like the most medically precise, I suppose. Like, it's like I almost said Dr. Carr. It's Dr. Gross's... He did a really good job with the first few films of making them seem a little more real, I suppose. But this one, it seems like the majority of the footage, at least, seems real. Like, I mean, I will say the one thing that did strike me as being a little weird about this was the odd electronic score, which is oddly reminiscent of the same odd electronic score that was used in a documentary called Mississippi Triangle that was released in the early 80s. And I know no one's probably heard of that. It's a fucking rad documentary about the racial struggles in the Mississippi Delta in the late 70s, early 80s between white people, Chinese people, and the black people. But yeah, the score for that sort of mimics or matches the score from this or vice versa or whatever. So I thought that was weird. I thought the yodeling during the avalanche scene in this was a little much. Like, it's like bad taste and all that. You know, it's just a little too on the nose that they're out in the Swiss Alps, and as the avalanche is happening, you yodel yodel hoo, yodel yodel hoo. I mean, so it's like the Faces of Death movies kind of hasn't lost their love of satire or some shit. Like, got to throw it back in our faces because it's not bad enough that these people actually got fucking smothered by snow. No, we got to have some yodeling put on top of it to really drive home the fact that we're in Europe, which I thought was sort of tasteless. What else did I want to say? Yeah, this one just feels like possibly the most real. I think the only thing in this that was a little suspicious for me, and maybe I'm wrong too, but the drugstore robbery, where the guys went in and slaughtered everybody in the drugstore, that seemed kind of fake. That might have been a reenactment. The bodies outside looked real enough, but then some of the angles were just a little too close and cut a little too clean, and it just felt like maybe that wasn't the most realistic thing here. But that's the only thing in this entry that I can think of that really kind of irked me, that made me feel like that was a reenactment. Like, everything else in this just feels legit. Like, I loved how they included boxing, how the guy, he doesn't die in the ring, but he ends up in a coma as the result of the bout in the ring. I thought that was a nice touch. I love how it just feels like, I don't know, everything that they switched to, like, despite how, like, on one hand, they would show, like, a car accident, and then it would go to an animal killing, and then it would go to some sort of assassination or whatever. It's just this time around, it feels more real. The first one had so many things about it that felt theatrical that you know that with this, the sequel, considering the financials and the commercial success of the first one, that they were attempting to up their game with this, no doubt. And it seems like the route they took was to choose to be a little more realistic. This has like some vicious footage of like the aftermath of a like passenger jet going down with the bodies strewn like across like I guess in some sort of warehouse where they were keeping them all while they were trying to figure out how many people had died. That footage was lethal. What else was on? Oh yeah, that's right. The inclusion of the daredevils. I thought that was amazing too, because you can actually get some professional shots and it doesn't look fake. If it was fake, I don't think it was, but you know, daredevils will hire camera people to sit in the car with them from time to time, so that when you see the daredevils, of course, dying in this, because again, it's a Faces of Death movie, if it isn't real, it feels real. But I did get the impression that it was real, so I thought the inclusion of daredevils was really, wow, I was almost going to say fun. Actually, yeah, fuck it. No, the inclusion of daredevils was a really fun segment into this. I felt the same way about the boxing. I thought that was a really fresh thing for this series to do. And sadly, despite all of the damage that daredevils and boxers continuously do to themselves, they didn't choose to further that and show it more in the third one or the fourth one or the fifth one or whatever. And I think that's kind of a waste, given how ridiculously theatrical the fourth one feels at times. It could have used some more grounding in reality by tossing in perhaps another boxing match gone wrong where the person's killed in the ring or something, because that's like real life horror shit that is terrifying, right? Fucking satanic cult selling body parts. Like, I'm sure that shit happened. Sure, Tipper Gore and everybody was right about everything and it was all Venom and Iron Maiden's fault, but come on. You know, just like in the, what is it, the third one? I think it's the third one. I already talked about it, the satanic cult. No, it's in the first one. The blood ritual in the first one is so dumb. But this is devoid of all that. This one just feels real. It just feels like this is an honest collection of clips of people dying in various disgusting ways, as well as showing animal killings, ritualistic killings, different burial types from around the world. And the movie ends, it culminates with a firing squad taking down a row of dudes. And then that odd sort of Mississippi Triangle-ish score kicks back in. You know, I really should check to see if the guy who did the score for this was the guy that did the score for the Mississippi Triangle. Maybe he is. I don't know. I will look into that, because it's fun looking into these things. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Yeah, the daredevils. The tone feels more clinical. It most certainly does. The yodeling after the avalanche again. Little tasteless, but it is Faces of Death. The whole thing's tasteless, so it sort of fits. But yeah, I think that's it. And this is actually the last one I'm going to do. I'm not touching the first or third ones, especially since I sort of picked them apart in this, considering how a good chunk of them don't feel the most real. It feels like there's a lot of really bad reenactments. But yeah, so like always, thank you so much for hanging out with me for almost 10 minutes while I discuss the second installment in the somewhat long-running series of Faces of Death films. This came out a million years ago when I was a little kid and I still had hope. Like always, don't forget that the world kicks so much more ass because you are in it. And I suggest right now maybe you go off and you go watch yourself a Faces of Death film on a Friday night, because that's what I did with my Friday night, which is now watched Faces of Death 2 again, because I don't know why, to be perfectly honest. These movies are fucking disgusting. But I know when I was a kid, the reason I did it way back when was because I knew that if that chick that I had my eye on knew that I had Faces of Death 3 at home, that she would fucking swoon and probably start to strip. She didn't swoon and she didn't strip. Girls thought this shit was gross. It was just me and my handful of friends that thought this shit was rad. Have a good night.